Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, good. Sound check. Um, Owner and operator of Swick Wine Cellars in Newberg, Oregon. We make usually around 5,000 or 6,000 cases per year. 50% of our fruit comes from Oregon, 50% comes from Washington State, 2 different climates. It's just myself and my co-winemaker, Maureen Eden. Maureen and I work on everything together. Maureen's usually back at the cellar more, and I'm kind of more, at the moment, doing more admin, but with COVID, I'm not out hustling as much. So I've been using, especially 2020, the year to kind of just be back in the cellar more and be more on top of the wines. That's kind of a quick overview on me. But so for 2020, obviously we're dealing with COVID, which set us back in the Willamette Valley quite a bit, just in every aspect, but financially as well. Tourism was down, tasting room sales. I don't have a tasting room and don't really do that, but it still affected the Oregon wine industry greatly. And then we had the smoke that came in September and hung out for a while. And with smoke taint, basically the molecules of the smoke compounds, if they're at a certain micron, they can pass through the skins or into the skins of the grapes, and it depends on where the grapes are during their ripening. And when you have problems with smoke in winemaking is when you have smoke or before harvest. And that was what happened this past year. And so winemakers had to make a lot of different choices. Some wineries chose not to make any wine from 2020, which would mean that they didn't harvest their own grapes, or if they buy grapes, they canceled contracts with their growers. Or people downsized, or people just threw in all their chips and decided to try to make the best that they could of the vintage and use their craft as a winemaker to kind of find out what works for them. That last option is what I chose. I chose to honor all of my contracts and try to find a way to make the best wines that I could, given the challenges of the year. Not only did we have smoke taint problems, we also had yields were down about 50% because of poor flowering. Poor weather during flowering in fruit set. So yields were about half of what they would have been, and we were dealing with smoke. So what I decided to do was to kind of put my eggs in several baskets. I wanted to do a lot more direct press, meaning no skin maceration at all. The grapes come into the winery and we put the grapes right into the press as soon as they get to the winery and squeeze the grapes and ferment that juice and not leave it to macerate, instead of leaving the grapes to macerate on their skins and pick up that flavor of the skins, which would be smoky possibly. So we're trying to avoid skin contact, and by doing that, you just want to, like I said before, directly press the wines, and then from there you kind of have to decide what you want to make. You want to make pet nat, or a stainless steel fermented white wine, or if it's a red grape, you're making rosé. I mean, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's what I chose to do with the 2020 vintage as far as dealing with smoke taint. And,
So Joe, I think a lot of people know you for your skin maceration, wines, your orange wines, your orange. You make a lot of those wines. So I think we just have to be resigned in these years of smoke taint that if we're supporting a winemaker that is prepared to honor contracts and make the best with the vintage, what they've got from the vintage. We just have to be accepting of the fact that there aren't going to be skin maceration wines. Is that kind of how you see it?
Kind of, yes and no. So like I was saying before, I did make some skin fermented, both red and white wines, you know, orange macerated wines. I just didn't make as many as I would have normally, just in case. Well, yeah, just with the smoke, I didn't want to dump, you know, half of my production down the drain, or do whatever I would do with it. But I did make some orange wines. I just didn't make as many of them as I normally would have. So you'll see less, in general, you'll see less red wine and orange wines coming from me from 2020, because I couldn't risk making all skin contact wines with that vintage. And I do like direct press, you know, sometimes, but stylistically, I did have to avoid skin contact on wines that I normally would have done skin contact on, like Marsanne, for example. I made a direct press Marsanne, and you know, like I was all my pet nuts. So
Cool, that makes sense.
and what happened with the orange wines that I did, for example, that I kind of rolled the dice on. So far, they're showing no smoke, so everything everything looks good in my orange wines.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through kind of your decision making through the vintage then, in terms of what you decided to, you know, to blend, or to you know, to which wines, which cuvées to go ahead and make? Or is it not, are you not even there at that point? It's just about getting the fruit in and making it as healthy as a ferment as possible, and then deciding on which wines come from that?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really have any ideas of what blends I'm going to do until the wine is actually, basically until it's technically wine, when it's through with malo, because then at that point I can assess and give it my own grade. You know, I go through and hand grade each barrel, and I have a list, and I put little notes on each barrel, and that's kind of how I do my blending. During harvest, it's all just keeping everything separate. So Malbec, well, normally Malbec is separate. You know, Sagrantino, Triganessino, all that stuff is all fermented separately and in barrel separately. And then after it's wine, what I think is wine, when it's done with primary and done with malolactic fermentation, that's when I'll go through and make decisions on blending. The only thing that's done at harvest would be co-ferments. So if I was going to do a Syrah Grenache Blanc, I'd have those. I would make that decision right at harvest, like the TLT.
Hey Joe, could you maybe just give us kind of a bird's eye view on your approach to how you actually make the wine? Just maybe take us through how a pet nat is made versus how you make a direct press wine.
So it's the first step is the same. You're taking the grapes and pressing them directly into a vessel of some sort. Most people use stainless steel tanks. That's what I use. And let's say, okay, what did I make this year? For pet nats, we made the City Pop, which is a blend, the Pet Natch, which is a blend. Let's take the Counoise Pet Nat, for example. The Counoise comes in, you're picking the grapes at sparkling wine levels. So you want more acid in the grapes and you want lower sugars. Lower sugars will give you lower alcohol wines. But if you pick too early, you're going to have really underripe flavors and vegetal flavors. So it's really important to pick the grapes at exactly the right time, especially if you're making sparkling wines. I usually pick my sparkling base around 20 bricks, or 19 or 20 bricks. And that equates to about 11 or 12% alcohol, depending on how it ferments out. So pick the Counoise, press it directly. This year, I let the juice, before it starts to ferment, I let it settle out so that if there was any smoke in the skins, that wouldn't be in the juice. So it's a common practice. A lot of people will settle their wines before they start to ferment. I normally in the past haven't, but this year that's a change that I made, is that I settled all of my wines before I went to tank or barrel. And that was just a precaution for the smoke tank. So I'm sorry, I'm going off topic here, but so pet nats, fermenting in tank until the juice gets down to around 10 grams per liter residual sugar. And then that's usually when I go to bottle. And actually have a pet nat in front of me, so I can kind of show you here. So, and go to bottle, put a crown cap on here, and then the fermentation finishes in bottle. And I really don't have an idea of when it's done, but usually I can tell because the juice isn't cloudy anymore. And then what I do after that is I will stick them neck down so that all the sediment gets trapped here in the, I'm using two hands so I can't show you, but in the bottom, in the neck here. And then I disgorge each bottle by hand. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And disgorging the wine releases the pressure, and it releases all that sediment that was trapped in the neck of the bottle. And then usually after I disgorge, I'll have about this much left in the bottle, and we'll top it back up to where it should be with other pet nat. And it's quite a labor-intensive process. And we made about 2,000 cases of pet nat this year, so a lot more than in the past. So there'll be a lot of different bubbles coming out throughout the year.
And so for you, in terms of like the winemaking that you do, is that really an amalgamation of the different travels that you've done in the past? And are you looking for grapes based on ideas of what you want to make, or do you just establish your relationships with your vineyard growers and then make what they offer you in terms of like how much, like where's the creative, or like how much is your vision coming from your vision and then finding fruit to match it, or are you looking for the right growers and then you kind of decide what to make based on the fruit that's available every year?
It's a little bit of both. For me, a lot of the choices varietally wise are my own tastes, and there's also some sentimental decision going into it. Like my time in Portugal was one of my favorite experiences that I've had, and I'm a huge Portuguese wine fan, and that's why I choose to work with Portuguese grape varieties if I can get them. I like colder climates. I like grapes that have lots of acid, that makes wines with lots of acid, and that don't get sugar spikes, that don't go higher than, I usually don't pick higher than about 22 or 23 bricks. 23 is even too high. 22 usually is as high as I go on all my wines, including my red wines. But as far as the growers, it's for me, the very, very bottom line, I'd say, and I kind of go back and forth. I've been more dogmatic about this in the past, but is organic, or a willingness and an interest to go organic. Like if a vineyard is one or two sprays basically from being organic, is trying to convince them to maybe eliminate those sprays and try to work organic because they're so close already. For example, like some of the new wineries that new vineyards that I'm looking at have been like that. They've been right on the verge of being organic, and it's basically just been a couple sprays of fungicide that are much more effective and cheaper than going the organic route. And so for me, I would say herbicide use is the huge line in the sand. Anyone using herbicides, I feel like I don't like to work with grapes that are where Roundup is used, and for a number of reasons. But I just don't. A lot of times, I don't like the way the wines show when they're cash cropped. You can taste it in the wine. Not the chemicals. You can taste the effects of the way that they're farmed. And organic, in my opinion, organic farmed or very low input. And there people are using a lot of different terms now, regenerative, and it's not as black and white as it used to be. Organic, not organic. But for me, herbicide use is definitely like I said, that's the first step, is getting rid of herbicides. Yeah, climate, grape variety, organic, or willingness to convert to organic.
And we have some questions from Jenna. Hey, Jenna, you can unmute yourself and ask some questions directly.
Hey.
Hey there.
I put my question on the chat actually. So you're talking about how it's really important to you to have organic vineyards or to support growers who are going organic, which I think is awesome because giving them that final push and a reason to do it, I think is a great thing. But a lot of people say that it's really expensive to do organic and to get the certification is expensive. But when I looked into it, it didn't seem that bad. Are people going to be getting away with this answer forever?
I don't think they will be. I think it's very site specific. Washington State really has no reason, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert, so I try not to have an opinion on something that I don't know enough about. And but I feel like Washington has really no reason to not be growing organic fruit, or at least grapes, because there's very little disease pressure up there. It's warm and dry, and I've never had issues with powdery mildew or botrytis. And so I think that people still do use the fact that it's too expensive as an excuse. But I think it's more, it has to do with the labor involved with it, not the actual product. So, for example, sulfur use instead of fungicide. You have to pay for the labor for workers to go out and spray every week to 10 days, depending on the weather. For 10 to 12 weeks during the summer. And the carbon footprint, of the tractor and the health of the worker being exposed to all that sulfur all the time. I think there are a lot of pluses and negatives for both sides of it, and I hope that we can find some alternatives to some of the very labor-intensive practices of farming that we have to do that could also be negative things, like tractor use and workers' health.
Right. That's a big one. I mean, for larger sites, how do you get around, trying to do no-till, which is obviously better for the environment?
So I work with one larger site and Zenith Vineyard, and they basically choose to, if they have a year where they feel like they need to save their crop, they do choose to use a fungicide, and so that's so far the only non-organic or practicing organic vineyard that I have worked with or am working with so far. So everyone else is between 2 and I think 7 acres. I don't know what Conley Vineyard is. Actually, Conley's more than that. Conley Vineyard is the biggest vineyard I work with, and I think they're 8 or 9. So yeah, I don't work with any larger vineyards other than Zenith.
And do you have any interest in farming yourself?
Yeah, well, not me just solo, but I am going to be farming, taking over complete vineyards, a couple of vineyards this year. One up in Yakima called Greenwald Vineyard. It's, I think, an acre and a half, and it's just Tempranillo and Viognier. So I might just do a cuvee that's a co-ferment of that, and just have it be an expression of that vineyard. You know, since I'll only get a couple tons each of those grape varieties. So Greenwald, and then this year I'll also be farming a vineyard that used to be called Rebecca's Vineyard down in the North Umpqua Valley, and I think they've renamed it to Sophie's Vineyard now. But it's either it's between 25 and 30 years old, and has Gamay and Semillon and Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Gris. And they're trained in this really weird vertical head trained trellising with really high wires. And I'm trying to find out more of why they did that. But yeah, so Rebecca's Vineyard and Greenwald Vineyard will be two vineyards that I will be farming completely with a consultant.
And what's the attraction for you of getting involved in that aspect of the work? And how long do these contracts go for? Like when you do this, is it like a certain number of year commitment? Because I'm guessing
Yeah,
that it takes time to see the results, right?
Definitely. It takes 3 years, I think, if you're doing analysis on the soils. The contracts that I have are both 3 years actually in this case. And then I also do have a grafting deal with another vineyard where basically we are converting to organic, but also trying to explore maybe some other grape varieties that might work in this particular terroir. It's in the Yamhill Carlton, and it's currently planted to Pinot Gris. And we were going to convert it to Melon, Aligote, and a Portuguese grape called Orinto. And that's another thing that I'm getting involved in, and that is a longer term thing as well. That and pre-planting, basically, if you show enough interest to a grower or make a commitment to them to buy, let's say I wanted to plant Ribolla Gialla on a vineyard. We'd go into a contract, and basically they would plant it for me, and I'd have it available in 4 or 5 years. And so I have a couple of those contracts as well, pre-planting.
I wanted to return to Jenna's question, because I think it's one that has quite a few threads in it. And that's like in terms of like relativity of organic. I'm sure you're seeing what the market is charging right now for grapes on various threads, or from sources you talk to. What would you say in terms of comparing organic versus non-organic prices? I'm guessing you're paying per acre versus per ton, or could you speak a little bit to that, like in terms of what's more expensive in terms of where you're sourcing the grapes from, Willamette Valley versus Natchez Heights in terms of organic fruit, versus more conventional fruit from those same areas, and how that all kind of plays out in terms of either price per acre, per ton.
Yeah, I mean, can I talk numbers? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure,
like
sure,
if it's
sure.
not like messing with, if I don't rub people the wrong way out in the Willamette Valley. The going rate for Oregon Pinot has definitely gone down over the last few years because there is a glut of it. There's a lot of it planted, and a lot of unsold fruit, and we've had a string of bumper crops. But even this last year, well, I guess we can't talk about this last year because of the smoke. Organic, having that buzzword associated with your grapes definitely does command a higher price. farming organically, not always, but more often than not, reduces your yields per acre. So most vineyards that I know in the Willamette Valley are trying to get $9,000 per acre on whatever fruit is within that acre. That's kind of more or less 9 to 10,000 per acre is what they are trying to get. So if you have 1 acre of Pinot Noir and you're trying to hit that $10,000 sweet spot so that you actually make money, you need to, if you're cropping at 3 tons per acre, you have to charge $3,300 per ton to get that. Cropping grapes is kind of like a hot topic within winemakers and grape growers. Some winemakers really want low yields. They think that low yields always makes better wine. I don't think it's that. I think that's a generalization. I think it really depends on your climate, the grape variety, the style of wines that you want to make. If you're looking to make really dark, intense, high points wines that marry to oak really well, you are better off cropping lower, and getting more expensive fruit. So let's say that same acre, you tell your vineyard, I want it cropped at 2 tons per acre. Then that means you're paying $10,000, you're paying $5,000 per ton. Doing the simple math that I kind of look at the price per ton equating to the retail price of the wine, $5,000 per ton, you need to get at least at a very, very minimum $50 retail to be able to pay for that wine. If that makes sense. So if I'm buying $2,500 a ton, let's say Cabernet from Yakima, in my mind, retail at the very minimum, I'd have to charge $25 per bottle to break even. So price differences between the Willamette Valley and Columbia Valley, I'd say on average for red grapes, it's almost double. For organic grapes, they do command a higher price. Usually in the high 2000s is where a lot of red grape varieties are, or around 3,000 for organic red fruit. And then with white grape varieties, it's usually a little less, like usually around 2,000. And then when the Willamette Valley white fruit is about that as well. For good organic white grapes, it's around 2,000, maybe 1,800. And so a lot of the price for fruit is like the main factor into what most winemakers price their wines. At least I do. Some winemakers will say you shouldn't look at that. You should charge what you think your wine is worth. I love all my wines. I think all of my wines, some of my wines are probably from the amount of passion and hard work that I put into them. I do think that they're probably worth a lot more than I charge for them. But it's a lot of money to charge that much for something that you're just going to pee out in a couple of hours too. And yeah.
And can vineyards charge the organic, say the minimum for, whatever that amount is per ton or per acre? Can they charge that amount if they just say they're organic, or does it really have to be USDA organic for them to be able to hit that, amount?
But then, like the question before about the cost of certification and all that stuff, it is good to have that validation and that authenticity. Most growers are not doing that, and I don't think that they're doing that to be shady. I think they genuinely are doing that because they think it is not worth the money that they put into it. So yeah, certified biodynamic is another one too. That's like a popular buzz catchphrase. Biodynamic fruit will definitely, if you're Demeter certified and you got all that, and you're checking all the boxes, you can definitely command a higher price for that. Whether or not it makes better wine, that's kind of up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Joe, we're going to open up the question.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say there are a lot of people who are practicing, quote unquote, practicing organic. That their prices per ton vary, are almost equivalent to quote unquote conventional grapes. So having that certification does actually mean something on the grape market. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're just gonna open up the questions for other people to ask you. So anyone who's on the call, feel free to jump in if you have any questions for Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hey there.
Hi, thanks for joining us today. I have some more questions about Portugal. Where were you in Portugal? Did you spend some time in Porto or the north, or were you in Alentejo? And maybe not this year with all the smoke, but have you had plans to make actual port or some of the richer wines from the south?
Yeah. So in Portugal, I've been all over Portugal in my travels, and in Madeira and the Azores. But for making wine, I worked in the Douro twice. I worked for Dirk Nieport in 2010, and then in 2015 I worked for Luis Seabra, who was Nieport winemaker in 2010, and then left and started his own thing. So I was working in the Douro, and that was where a lot of my inspiration, in particular, whole cluster fermentations. That's where I really got exposed to a lot of that. And you know, the Douro is a warmer climate growing region, not as hot as the Alentejo, but still relatively hot. It's just mountainous. It's a lot kind of like, it reminds me a lot of Yakima and the Columbia Gorge, if you were to kind of put those together, the climate there. And then let's see, fortified wines, port wines. So I've yet to really find any Portuguese grape varieties other than Wilridge Vineyard, which I just started working with last year. Wilridge has Touriga Nacional, and Sagrantino and Nebbiolo and Sangiovese and some other stuff. But I would love to do a fortified zero sulfur port styled wine someday. Yeah. I just don't know the logistics about having to get bonding because it's a spirit, because I have to, you know, have a spirit in my winery. And I think there's some laws about having spirits in your winery if you're just a winery. You know, I don't want, since it's legal, I'm going to talk about it. So I did make a cannabis wine this year, a cannabis just to play around with. So basically just infusing Cabernet with cheesecloths with cannabis. So we'll see how that turns out.
Is it still fermenting now?
It's not fermenting, it's aging. So I basically just took a barrel and wrapped up a bunch of ground up cannabis into cheesecloths, and I'm just going to let them macerate in there for the next like 4 or 5 months.
Was this organic cannabis?
It's a mix of different cannabis because we had to get a lot of it, but most of it is actually organic. Yeah, it's from Eugene.
And was it a particular strain? Was it sativa or?
I think we're paused. Oh, there you go.
Was it a particular strain of marijuana that you chose?
It was a hybrid that made up most of it. I don't remember the name of it. It was something, it was Grateful Dead oriented. I know that.
Well, going back to Portugal, the palette you made was delicious this year. Is that
Thank
something
you.
that's possible with smoke taint? Would you be making something like that? Are you making something like that with the 2020 vintage?
Yeah, I will be. I only made a few barrels of actual red Graciano, and most of the Graciano I made actually was direct press rosé. But Graciano is a great variety that has a lot of skin pigment to it. And so even with the direct press, it still looks really dark. But the difference between last year and this year, I guess, I think probably when I'm going to have to blend the wine, it's not a co-ferment. It'll be a little bit lighter. It'll be almost like an orange wine is my guess this year. So not as like bright, kind of pinkish purple like it was. But yeah, it's that's why I like wines like that. I like making wines like that. It's sentimental. It makes me remember being in the Douro. And that particular style of wine is kind of like the house wine for most people. It's just, it's meant to be lower in alcohol and fresh. And people in Portugal drink wine at every meal, including breakfast. They drink cold wine with their breakfast, at least up in the mountains where I was living. And so the way that wine is pronounced too is Paulette.
Paulette.
Yeah, like
Thank
Paul
you.
McCartney, and I'm not done yet.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Hey, Joe, I have a question for you. Can you explain to us what's the difference between co-fermenting and blending two separately vinified grapes? How does what do you think of, like, when you make a decision to co-ferment versus blending separately fermented wines, what's the different result that you get from that?
Yeah, so with co-ferments, you basically have to pick or harvest the grapes on the same day, and logistically, it's really hard to make that happen unless the grapes are exactly where you want them to be, or you can compromise. Like if you're doing a Syrah Viognier and your Viognier is ready, but your Syrah is a little underripe, you can still wing it and try to make a wine out of it. But I think that co-ferments really have to be in the moment. They have to be like, if I'm up in Yakima and I'm and my Counoise from a vineyard is going to be harvested on the same day as, you know, another grape variety, let's say Roussanne or something. And I just kind of think of how those grape varieties work together, or if they would make a blend. It's usually thought out. I don't just say, okay, I'm just going to put Counoise and Roussanne together for the heck of it and see what happens. I mean, there's meaning behind it. But the end result on the wine is, with co-ferments, I find that the wine is more cohesive, that it tastes like something that has been together since the very beginning. And when you blend wine, you're taking two wines that have been separate from each other throughout the whole process and forcing them together in a tank or a vessel of some sort. And I think it takes a wine, it takes a while for that wine to actually come into itself. And that might be kind of hocus pocus, but the way I see it is the wine is probably more authentic and more cohesive if you do a co-ferment rather than if you're blending, especially if it's white and red. I enjoy both. I enjoy co-fermenting and I enjoy blending.
How do you manage all those separate tanks and vessels, knowing what's going to go into what, and how do you manage that operation?
So I usually hire a couple interns during harvest, and Maureen, my co-winemaker, and I go over what's going to happen during the day. You know, we kind of have a routine. We do morning and evening foot stomping, punch downs. The choices that we make stylistically usually have to do with vintage and the quality of the fruit, like stem inclusion. If we have a lot of powdery mildew will attack the stems before the actual grapes. And you know, in a case like that, 2015, we had to destem some of our Concealed Pinot Noir because of botrytis on the stems. And so, we do all of our ferments that are red, that are skin contact, in 1.5 ton, 1.3 ton open top fermenters. And during the height of harvest, we were basically just foot stomping grape fermenters all day long. And I do it as much as I can too if I'm not out at the vineyard getting fruit. Did that answer your question?
How about the names of your wine? Like, how do you decide what to name things?
It's usually like when I need when I make kind of a quirky blend, I have to have a name for it, and it's usually autobiographical. It can, and a lot of times that there's not really a whole lot of meaning behind it other than I just need a name. So sometimes I'll name a wine after one of my favorite songs or musicians, or like Only Zool's like a reference to Ghostbusters, Sigourney Weaver. And a lot of times they're inside jokes too with me and my friends. Another example might be, Chardonnay. I love Chardonnay. Well-made Chardonnays. I have a particular style that I think I like. I like more like white Burgundy or Chablis. Chablis is one of my favorite white wines to drink. I also like Blanc de Blanc champagnes very much too. I love the grape Chardonnay, but I think it has a little bit of a weird thing attached to it with American drinkers, because we're so varietal centric. I didn't want to make, I wanted to make Chardonnay, but I didn't want to put Chardonnay on the front label. And when I was thinking about this, I was having a conversation just about millennials and culture, and someone had brought up the abbreviation WID in conversation, and when we were talking about this, and I had no idea what that meant, and my friend explained it to me, and I just decided to put that on the front label of my wine instead of Chardonnay, just because I wanted people to focus on the wine and not just see it as another Chardonnay, a Swick Chardonnay and whoever else's Chardonnay just sitting on a lineup. I don't know. I don't think people would be as interested in the wine. So I know it's kind of gimmicky, but I have a weird sense of humor, and I think it's funny. And hopefully it opened up people to taste Columbia Valley and Willamette Valley Chardonnay in the natural wine community.
What about city pop?
That's a genre of music that I really like, that I listen to a lot. And it's just, it's a fizzy drink. It's kind of, I just thought it was a catchy name, and it's autobiographical. It's a type of music that I love, that not many people know about, and I think if you're open-minded and want to listen to something that's not what you'd normally listen to and want to hear city pop, it's poppy Japanese music from the 80s, basically. And I took Japanese as a foreign language growing up, and did an exchange program in Japan. And so again, it's just, it's a lot of what I do is kind of part of who I am. It's autobiographical.
Cool.
Hi Joe, how's it going?
Good.
I just got a quick question about your fruit and your sources, and what's your connection with Washington fruit, since you're an Oregon winemaker, and why do you keep coming back for Washington fruit? Is it the terroir, the varietals, and most people, I feel like, would stick to sort of their local region and don't sway too far from that. Do you ever see yourself getting fruit from California, or do you?
Yeah. So
what's your limits for the reach of where you choose your varietals, I guess?
It's a great question, and I like talking about that. So I'll start off with my connection to Washington State. In 2003, um, my first harvest was with Owen Rowe at their facility in Oregon, and that was really when I was getting into. And I'd been drinking wine for a while at that time, but I was really into big, over-the-top, extracted, jammy, just in-your-face wines. And David O'Reilly at that time made that style of wine. And so my connection to Washington fruit was working for Owen Rowe and getting to know the terroir of Yakima and Walla Walla and some of these vineyards that Owen Rowe was sourcing fruit from at that time. And then through David O'Reilly, I met Peter Rosbach of Chenin. And so that was kind of a continuation of Washington-centric Oregon winemaker. Chenin Vineyard, which is now where I make my wines. But 10 years down the road, I ended up moving into Medici Vineyard. And so my first few harvests in wine production was where I got exposed to Washington fruit. Both sides of my family are from the Dalles, Columbia Valley. There's that connection there. Let's see. I felt like Washington wine, to me, and when I started making Washington wines, I felt like everyone was making basically the same type of wine. And I thought that there was potential to make something that was more along the lines of what my vision was and my palate. And I found out, I did some research and found out about the Natchez Heights AVA in that area, and saw that it was higher in elevation and colder, and there was a possibility to make the style of wines that I wanted to, but a little bit more elegant and restrained, more Vedra with 12% alcohol and lots of acid, and Graciano and Grenache and all of these things. So I saw the potential there. It's not really represented by, again, quote unquote, natural wine makers yet, for the most part. I really like what Devium is doing in Walla Walla and Hayu, in the Columbia Gorge. But I also saw the writing on the wall being out in the market. Now, my first two vintages were almost 100% Pinot Noir. And when I started doing market visits, my first market with my wines was New York City. And when I was in New York City, it was saturated with Oregon Pinot Noir. And, luckily I sold my wines, and I think I have a very unique style of Pinot Noir. I was talking with Trini about this last night, actually. And, I almost always I love making Pinot Noir and drinking it, but it's almost like an afterthought because I make so many other weird varieties and quirky blends. And yeah, I am an Oregon guy, born and raised, but with where I am and where I was when I started, I just didn't feel like I wanted to compete with the Archery Summits and the Domaine Serenes and Bergstroms and all these people who had been flying the Pinot Noir flag for so long. And I wanted to do something different. And so Washington, that's basically why I started working with Columbia Valley, Washington. And then interest in new states. I'd really like to make some wines from Idaho, if I can find some organic grapes. And then California, Joel Burt of Los Harris is one of my favorite winemakers to talk with about anything, but mostly we talk about music and winemaking. And our palates are very much alike, and we kind of have the same ethos. And so I'm going to talk with him, and also Evan Lewandowski, another winemaker that I really like a lot. And both of them, I think, have some options for me to play with some California fruit this coming year. I just have to figure out what that's going to be. It might be some Carignan, so that would be kind of cool, or some Portuguese grape varieties.
Joe, how would that work? Would you go down to California, keep the fruit there and go down and make it in someone else's facility, or would you need to truck the fruit up to Oregon?
I'm trying to figure that out. I would prefer to, just because of harvest, I would prefer to go down and get the fruit and truck it back up to Oregon. But it's such a long drive that you kind of have to be a little bit proactive about keeping the fruit fresh and cold. So I might have to get a refrigerated truck or buy dry ice and do it that way. So we'll see. I might be able to make it at a different facility down in California, or just truck it up here. It depends on if I'm doing a collaboration or if it's 100% Swick wines. Most likely, if I'm buying grapes, what I'll do is I'll take a truck or 2 trucks and drive down the day before harvest and get the fruit then and then truck it back up. But in a couple of weeks, I'll be going down to do some scouting and kind of see what's available. So I think that I might have to call it an American wine though, because I'm an Oregon winery. I don't think I can call it Mendocino or whatever on my label.
Once you cross the border?
Yeah. Like if you're a winery that's in Oregon, you're not allowed to have another state's like this is another, here I'm using this pet nat for so many examples. It's this one. You can't really see it on here, but this is a wine that's from Vermont. It's a pet nat, and the whatever goes into it is from Vermont and New Hampshire, and that's a no-no with the TTB. You're not allowed to have multiple states, to my knowledge.
So it becomes American wine. That's the term.
Yeah, I'd have to call it American wine. I can't say it's California or Mendocino or Russian River or whatever.
Hey, we got a couple questions here by chat, and one of them, this is Sarah. Sarah, if you want to jump in, you were asking Joe about a wine called FBIB.
Oh, that's on the back of back of my Bring It.
Yeah, yeah. Can you explain that to people what that means?
Sure. So it's a little bit vulgar, so I hope that expletives don't bother anyone here. But it's another inside joke. It's just kind of it comes from my time spent in the Russian River when I was working for Costa Brown. I cut my teeth with them for about 4 years in the Russian River, and there was a guy there who used to just always say "bring it," and we just kind of made fun of him, and then we added on some words, and so FBIB is it's the F word, FUCKING, bring it, BI, and then the last is biatch. So fucking bring it, biatch. And basically, it's just it's like,
it's kitchen talk. It's
when
back of the house kitchen talk.
Yeah, when wine gives you lemons, make beef stew, or when your truck breaks down during harvest, or if you have like a 30-ton day where you have to stay up all night and process fruit for 24 hours, like it's just kind of a way of thinking, like when you're just bring it on, fucking bring it.
And then another question that Sarah has is, she said, can you talk a little bit about Sauvignon Verdejo or Auxerrois that you shared on Facebook recently? Did you do some kind of post about this recently?
Yeah, you can look on my Instagram. So one thing I did with my social media as of the new year is that my website director and myself decided to kind of separate my own like personal posts of just because non-relevant things like whatever music I'm listening to or whatever, and try to keep that separate from my brand. So if you look at my Swick Wines page now, I'm trying to keep it more just wine oriented and less, me and my own life doing whatever I do. And I feel a lot better about that because I just like to keep the two things separate now. And if you look at my page, you'll see sample pictures of each of those wines. And what I was doing last week is I was racking barrels. And racking is basically when you're sticking your barrel wand into the barrel and sucking all of the juice out, except for the stuff on the very bottom, which is where there's usually a layer of sediment, of mud and dead yeast lees. It's lees. So you're separating the wine off of the lees that's at the bottom of the barrel. And I do this racking because I like to have my wines clarified, and you can do that a few ways. You can do racking, which is what I do, or you can filter wines. And I prefer not to filter if I don't have to. So what I do is I rack and settle the wine out. And I do this a couple of times before I go to bottle. And what she was referencing, the Sauvignon Blanc, Verdelho, and whatever other wine it was. So those were all barrel samples of orange wines after the racking that I will be releasing probably here in like March or April. And they're really yummy, and they really have that bright neon orange color. And I just didn't make very much of them. So I'm gonna get as many to Washington as I can, but just know that, you know, it'll be in small amounts.
Hey, another question that Jenna had that I thought was really fun is she was wondering, do you play music to your wines when they're in barrel?
Not with my instruments. That's kind of a hobby that I've taken up over the last year or so. Is I really think my calling in life, naturally, my natural ability is music, and I have an ear for it, and I grew up playing it, and then somehow I got into wine and kind of stopped. But winemaking is not something that's come naturally to me. It's been something that I've had to. It took me a long time just to even get it. And I think some people get it and some people don't. But I do play a lot of music at the winery, and I don't play them necessarily for my barrels, but depending on what kind of mood I'm in, yeah, I play music at the winery, but not specifically for my barrels.
What instruments do you play?
Let's see. Well, I learned how to read music from taking piano lessons growing up. I wouldn't say that I'm a piano player. And then let's see, the French horn. I was kind of a band geek. And then I went to church when I was younger. I played handbells in the church choir. That doesn't really count. Bass, guitar, and I'm learning sitar right now, the Indian kind of guitar-like instrument. So yeah, that's it.
So your aim is to approximate Ravi Shankar?
Yeah, I do listen to a lot of Ravi Shankar actually in the winery. That's one of the genres or classical Indian music that I listen to more often than not, especially to kind of get centered. If I'm having a hard time focusing. But yeah, I'll never be as good as Ravi Shankar at sitar. But he did inspire me to buy a sitar. And there's a very good classical Indian music shop in Seattle, too, if you're ever interested. It's like the best in the country.
What's the shop called?
I forget. It has something to do with rain. I'll have to look it up. But if you're looking for tablas or a sitar or a tempura or any type of classical Indian instrument, there's a place in Seattle. I don't know the name.
I love that your wines are focused via classical Indian music.
Yeah, classical Indian music, ambient music mostly, city pop sometimes if I'm a little bit more uppity. Yeah, that's not a lot of like Cardi B or any of that stuff. I don't really know pop music that much. I really like Smash Mouth, the song All Star.
Hey Joe, have you checked out Sean Johnson and the Wild Lotus Band?
No.
They're amazing. They're a band from down in New Orleans, and he was a yoga teacher in New York for a while, and I'll send you a link. They're a lot of fun.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you for your time. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to jump in now, or else we're just going to wrap up. Oh, here's another question from Jenna. Someone was just asking if you end up doing any kind of collaboration with Ruth Lewandowski or the Laharis wines, you know, if you did a collab with them, would you be able to have wine come to in this market, or would it all just stay in California?
Yeah, if I did a collab with them, it would definitely come to this market because we share a distributor, Walden. So logistically, that makes it pretty easy. Yeah.
Okay, there's the answer. There's the answer, Jenna.
Well, so I was the crazy person who drove 16 hours last year to go to the tasting with where you and Andrew Mulligan and Las Haras, you guys are all doing a tasting. But a lot of the wines are not offered. I think my distributor in Slow is Amy Atwood, if that's right. So I don't get a lot of the fun stuff that you make, and I would be really excited about something like Lewandowski. I'm a big fan, and obviously Las Haras. I have like a bunch of their stuff. So how would I, as the person who wants to look out for that, be able to get some?
Well, I'm pretty sure if we made that, it would probably be centered around the West Coast. I self-distribute in Oregon, so it'd be available here, you know, basically at Dame or Ardor in Portland, or through me at the winery. But otherwise, if we did a collab, it would be available through Walden in Seattle, Amy Atwood in California, or Jenny and Francois in New York. And I think that would probably be the extent of where, if we did do a collaboration, that's where the wine would go.
And my last thing is that I think the Riesling's probably my favorite thing from Lewandowski. So if you do Riesling, I would be really excited.
Yeah, I'd like to do a Riesling with Evan. We'll see.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks for your time chatting with us and giving us an update. And we look forward to having you in the market when we can start hosting folks after everyone's been vaccinated.
Yes. Yeah. I even before then, you know, I know we can't see each other, but I'll be popping around around Washington here pretty soon, in Seattle and other areas. But I can't wait. I'm hopeful that we can get back to somewhat like it was before after we get vaccinated.
Right. Well, thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us for the call. I'm gonna this has been recorded and we'll be uploading it to our YouTube page in case you want to revisit it in the future. Thank you, Joe. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.